My name is Mara. I used to work for my uncle, a big-name businessman, just as a regular assistant. Then he kicked me out of the company in front of everyone, accused me of betrayal, theft, and conflict of interest. Who would have thought all those awful things would end up making me $12 million? Let me tell you how. No fluff, just the facts. I never asked him for anything. It was my mother's idea, of course. She called me one morning while I was halfway through a lukewarm coffee and a quarterly market report. "It's just a few months," she said. "He's family. You're smart. He could use someone reliable." That was her way of making it sound like a favor. But it wasn't. It was a way to smooth over years of silence between my mother and her older brother, the man they called a self-made success. So I said yes. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the corner of a glass-walled office, scanning a stack of vendor contracts while my new boss, my uncle, bragged on a call about how he turned every dime into a damn dollar. Everyone at Whitlow and Hunt wore the same smirk, tight, polished, and too white. The women clicked across the marble in heels that cost more than my rent. The men checked their reflections twice for every once they checked their phones. And me? I was the quiet one in flats and clean lines, the assistant no one remembered the name of. That suited me fine. Uncle Victor didn't know my background in data modeling. He thought I worked at a bank once, maybe twice. He assumed I wouldn't understand the language in his contracts, the real language, the layered logic behind payment delays, sub-suppliers, proxies. But I read everything. And I remembered. "Hey, Mara." That was Lindsay, the executive assistant I replaced. She popped her head into my cubicle without knocking. "He wants you in the West Room at 10. Bring your laptop." Please subscribe to the Revenge Bay channel and leave your feedback in the comments. Don't miss a single exciting story. Thank you very much, and I will continue. The West Room was where real decisions were made, but I wasn't invited to those. Until now. At 9:58, I walked in. No one looked up. 6 men sat around the table, all slick hair and tailored shirts. Victor leaned back, arms folded behind his head, smiling like a king entertaining peasants. "This is Mara," he said. "My niece. She's got a good head. Quiet type." That was the first time he introduced me to anyone. Not as a team member. Not as an analyst. Just a niece. "A favor. Grab a seat, sweetheart." Sweetheart. They were discussing a potential expansion deal. Logistics, timelines, shell companies for offloading risk. I listened. I took notes. I pretended not to notice how one of them slipped a folder under the table to another. No eye contact, no comment. Just a quiet transaction. Have you ever sat in a room where everyone thinks you're invisible? It's fascinating. People say more when they assume you don't matter. After the meeting, Victor patted my shoulder. "You don't have to worry about all the business lingo," he said. "Just keep track of my calendar and we'll be golden." I smiled and nodded. But that night, in my small apartment above the bakery, I started a new folder on my hard drive. I labeled it plainly, "Things Worth Remembering." Because I knew what I was looking at. I'd seen structures like this before, at conferences, in court filings, in the margins of stories that never made it to the front page. And they all started the same way, with men who believed they were too important to be touched. You ever wonder how many crimes go unpunished simply because no one who notices has the power to care? I noticed. And I had time. The days at Whitlow and Hunt passed with mechanical precision. Victor's empire ran on rituals: Monday morning deal reviews, Tuesday lunch with the firm's PR handler, Thursday strategy calls no one strategized for. And I watched. Always listening, always invisible. By the 3rd week, I could predict who he'd ignore, who he'd flatter, and who he'd crush under polite smiles and passive-aggressive notes. Circle back later meant bury it. We'll revisit meant no. Everyone played along because Victor played to win. One evening, he left early for a gala. He liked to call them appearances, as if being photographed next to venture capitalists was some noble duty. I stayed behind, told Lindsay I was finishing an investor summary. I wasn't. I opened the secured drawer in his desk. Not because I'm a thief, but because he used the same 4-digit code for everything. His father's birth year. Public record. Almost insulting, really. Inside, vendor ledgers, flagged transactions, hard copies of something called the Stonehall Agreement, not in our system. 3 shell companies with similar logos. Wire transfers off books signed not by Victor, but by someone named T. Marrow. No Marrow worked here. I scanned the docs, saved them to an encrypted USB I'd brought in the lining of my bag. And then I returned everything exactly as it was. Back home, I added it all to the folder. Things worth remembering became worth more than they think. Victor often called me into meetings after that. He liked how quiet I was. How I didn't make it about myself. That's what he valued, women who didn't challenge, who nodded while men made moves around them. He never once asked what I thought. Only if I was free to reschedule his lunch with the guys. A man in accounting once told me in passing, "You're lucky. No one expects you to know anything." He meant it kindly. But it landed like truth. I started making backup copies of Victor's schedules, noting when certain vendors stopped appearing on invoices but started showing up as consultants. I flagged when checks were paid to companies with P.O. boxes in states no one in our office had ever visited. I watched the patterns form like constellations across spreadsheets. They weren't sloppy. Just arrogant. The real trick was keeping still. Never appearing too interested. Never letting on that I knew how to use pivot tables in Excel or how to trace a payment routed through Belize back to a third-tier contractor in Houston. I built my second folder. This one wasn't digital. It lived offline. Paper only, in a locked case under my bed. I wasn't sure yet what I was building. I just knew it was bigger than a petty fraud scheme. This was structure. Intent. A network designed to survive collapse. And I'd already found one crack in the wall, the name T. Marrow, which didn't exist on payroll, in the registry, or in any official filing. But the signature matched another file, one that listed Victor as strategic advisor. Funny how often that phrase shows up when people want deniability. I'm not saying I knew what was coming. But I did feel it, something shifting. Like pressure building behind drywall. I just needed to wait for the next seam to give. I never drew attention to myself, but I was always in the room. That's the trick, really. Don't take up space. Don't correct anyone. Don't remind them you're there. Just show up 5 minutes early, pour coffee, and take good notes. People like feeling important. They like being overheard by someone they think won't understand. Lindsay started handing me her extra tasks, meeting minutes, travel reports, calendar adjustments. She was planning to leave anyway. Some fiancé in New York, something about moving upward. I wished her well. Genuinely. With her gone, I had more access. I sat in more meetings. I touched more files. And slowly, Victor's partners got used to me. I was background noise, the girl who didn't ask questions and always had their documents printed and stapled. But I was watching. Always watching. There was a pattern to who showed up and when. The same 3 men every second Thursday. Closed door. 45 minutes. No email records, no calendar entries. And they always left with clean manila envelopes unmarked. They didn't say much around me. But one afternoon as they were leaving, I heard one of them laugh and say, "If this goes sideways, I'm not taking the fall." That's what made me look deeper. On my lunch breaks, I searched company registries. On my commutes, I scanned industry news for shell acquisitions and offshore asset shifts. Do you know how easy it is to hide money when no one's looking for it? But it's even easier to hide people, especially when they don't exist on paper. T. Marrow kept appearing. On contracts. On internal memos. On authorization forms. Always as a third party. Always with a different title. Never traceable. So I created a fake identity of my own. Not to do anything illegal, just to run small tests. I built a consulting company, basic, quiet, unassuming, and used it to apply for a subcontracting bid on a minor logistics job that had passed through Victor's hands. It was approved in 4 days. No call. No vetting. Just wire details and a signature at the bottom, T. Marrow. That was when I knew the system wasn't broken. It was intentional. Built to move money in silence. To reward names that didn't exist. I was inside something bigger than a crooked business. I was inside a machine. You ever wonder how many people get away with this because they hide in plain sight? I didn't touch the money. I closed the account before any transfers landed. But the approval alone told me enough. The gate wasn't locked because they didn't think anyone would walk through it. That night, I printed the entire approval chain, highlighted each name, drew arrows, built a map. And at the center of that web, right where all the threads converged, was Victor's signature, not once but 5 times. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded the page, slid it into the case under my bed, and wrote one more name on the front. Me. It happened on a Monday. Of course it did. Mondays were Victor's favorite day to feel powerful, to walk into the office like a king returning from conquest. He liked to fire people on Mondays, restructure departments, announce new partnerships, control the temperature of everyone's week. That morning I came in early, earlier than usual. I brought my own coffee, took my time unlocking my desk, then walked calmly into Victor's office and left my laptop on the table. Unlocked. Screen lit. A single folder open on the desktop. Then I walked out. I didn't go far. Just to the lobby, where the morning sun hit the marble at just the right angle. I sat by the window, checking headlines on my phone, pretending not to notice how fast the day would unravel. By 9:42, security called me back upstairs. Victor was pacing behind his desk, jaw clenched, sleeves rolled up. Sit, he said. Not asked. Ordered. I sat. What is this? He turned the screen to me, the folder I'd left open. Inside, selected screenshots of payments routed through a series of holding companies. Just enough detail to raise alarm. Not enough to confirm anything illegal. I met his stare, not smiling. It's something I was asked to look into. By who? His voice rose. I said nothing. Jesus Christ, Mara. Are you out of your depth or just stupid? The room got quiet. One of the partners, Robert, stepped in, holding a printed email I recognized. It was one of the fake inquiries I'd sent from the dummy consulting firm weeks ago. Robert looked rattled. Victor, this vendor was approved. Through T. Marrow. Victor turned red. You trying to sabotage us? He snapped. Is that what this is? The performance began. I'd expected it, the public scolding, the feigned betrayal, the sudden rewriting of history. She's been off lately, Lindsay chimed in from the hallway. Quiet. Secretive. I thought maybe she was dealing with something personal. It was like watching people build a case in real time, brick by brick. They asked me to surrender my keycard. I handed it over. Asked to pack my things. I nodded. You ever watch a room of powerful people try to contain panic by pretending it's righteous anger? They weren't firing me because they had proof. They were firing me because they had fear. I'd shown them just enough to make them uncomfortable, and now they were scrambling to isolate the threat. I took the elevator down with my box of office plants and folders. Nobody said goodbye. Outside, the city moved like nothing had happened. I walked 2 blocks, turned a corner, and smiled for the first time in weeks. They found what I wanted them to find. They opened a window I'd left unlocked. They believed they were closing the door on me, but they just invited me in. For the first few days, I didn't answer messages. Not from old colleagues. Not from my mother. Not even from Lindsay, who had the nerve to text me, "Hope you're okay, girl." Crazy week, huh? No one said the word fired, but I could feel it floating in the silence. Victor made sure of that. An HR rep sent a formal release agreement, dressed up as a courtesy. For your records, it said. I didn't sign. Didn't need to. They wanted me gone, not legally bound. And in that silence, I finally had room to move. There's something liberating about no longer having to play along. No small talk. No pretending you don't understand the deal terms being whispered across a conference table. No smiling politely when men cut you off mid-sentence. You'd be surprised what you can build in the dark, when no one's watching. I bought a cheap desk off Craigslist and set it up in my kitchen, pulled out the encrypted drive from the lining of my coat and plugged it into my laptop. The folder bloomed open, wire diagrams, timelines, transaction trails, cross-checked names. It wasn't just information anymore. It was architecture. I created a new entity, nothing flashy. A consulting company with a neutral name, based in Nevada, with an online-only footprint and a clean, polished site. I wasn't interested in headlines. I was interested in silence. Then I called an old acquaintance, Carter Lang, former compliance officer turned independent contractor. We weren't friends exactly. But he owed me a favor. One I'd never called in. Until now. I need you to vet something, I told him. What kind of something? An ecosystem. He whistled quietly. How big? Interstate. Possibly international. A pause. How soon? Now. Please subscribe to the Revenge Bay channel and leave your feedback in the comments. Don't miss a single exciting story. Thank you very much, and I will continue. He didn't ask why I had what I had. Or how. The truth is, Carter had seen enough of these webs to know what they looked like before they snapped. I sent him only what I wanted him to see, a curated slice of the map. Enough to confirm what I suspected. That Victor's empire was more than just fragile, it was legally indefensible if pushed in the right places. I didn't want to destroy it. Not yet. I wanted to replace it. So I built a second structure. This one not fake. Not for testing. I designed a lean, flexible advisory group with a single mission: risk isolation and strategic cleanup for high-value corporate clients. But here's the trick: every principle, every framework, every internal safeguard was designed to mirror the cracks in Victor's system. I knew how to catch them because I'd worked inside them. By the end of the second week, I had a business license, a contract template, a pro bono first client, and a clean ledger. I didn't advertise. I didn't post anything online. I didn't even update my LinkedIn. But whispers travel faster than press releases. And the ones who knew how Victor operated, they started to reach out. It started with a supplier. Nothing dramatic. Just a delay on a shipment. Then another. Then a contract retracted mid-renewal. Victor blamed logistics. Global instability. The usual scapegoats. But those of us who've read the fine print know, when a supplier stops returning your calls, it's not a scheduling issue. It's trust. I wasn't behind the retraction, not directly. But 2 weeks earlier I'd met the firm's risk consultant for coffee. Julia Hart. Sharp, understated, allergic to nonsense. I don't know what's going on over there, she said, stirring her espresso. But there's more smoke than usual. You think it's fire? I asked. I think it's something wrapped in expensive cologne. She smiled, but her eyes stayed flat. We talked mechanisms, blind payment chains, offshore routing, vendor layering. I didn't mention Victor. But I didn't have to. Julia wasn't stupid. 3 days later, the contract dissolved. Quietly. Cleanly. Just a line of text in a corporate bulletin. The ripple was small, but it landed hard. Victor's team scrambled. I could picture it, the locked meeting room, the whiteboard full of excuses, someone from legal trying to sound calm while sweating through his collar. I imagined Victor pacing in front of his team, voice tense. Don't jump to conclusions, he'd say. It's a hiccup. You don't fix rot with optimism. You cut it out before it spreads. Then came something I didn't expect, a message from Clara DeWitt. She used to run investor relations at one of Victor's sister firms. She left last year. No public fallout, no press release. Just vanished. Her message was short. You still working quietly? I've got a situation you might want to look at. We met at a narrow cafe tucked behind a florist shop. Midday. Neutral ground. She wore dark sunglasses and a black coat, like someone trying not to be seen but knowing full well she already had been. Thank you for meeting, she said, slipping into the seat across from me. I didn't know who else to ask. What happened? Bad acquisition. The numbers don't add up. Capital flows being rerouted, discreetly but not cleanly. I think they're cooking the filings. Which firm? She paused. Harrow Partners. They've got a joint project with Whitlow and Hunt. I didn't flinch. How much is at risk? North of 8 figures. I tried flagging it internally. You can guess how that went. She took a sip of coffee, then looked me dead in the eye. Can you help me? Yes, I said. But you won't hear from me directly again. I'll send what you need. She nodded. No follow-up. No negotiation. Sometimes the most desperate people are also the most efficient. I didn't send her everything, just enough to unwind the mess. Strip out the false fronts, reroute the capital trail, isolate the risk. It took me 4 hours. She offered to pay. Send it to the kids' literacy program, I said. Under your name. 3 days later, I got a contract offer from her new firm. Discreet. Sealed. 5 figures per month for silent advisory work. I said yes. You'd be surprised how fast a reputation spreads when no one's quite sure what you do, but everyone agrees you do it well. Victor didn't know I was behind any of it. But he felt it. He started showing up earlier. Calling meetings that didn't need to happen. Repeating instructions just to be sure people were listening. He stopped making jokes. The thing is, control has a scent when it's slipping. And I think for the first time in a long time Victor smelled it. It came through his assistant. Not Victor directly. An email, no subject line, forwarded from a generic corporate address. The message was short. Victor Whitlow would like to meet. In private. No lawyers. No press. I stared at it longer than I should have. He hadn't contacted me once since the day he fired me. Not a call. Not a message. Not even a second-hand inquiry through my mother. But now, after a few suppliers went quiet and an unforeseen delay stalled one of his mid-tier acquisitions, now he wanted to talk. I didn't respond immediately. Not because I was unsure, but because I knew he'd interpret the silence exactly the way I wanted him to. I replied 2 days later. Tuesday. 4 p.m. Fulton Street. Corner office. You know which one. It was the private conference room at a boutique law firm I'd done some quiet strategy work for. Neutral territory. One-way mirrored glass. Clean table. No tech on the walls. When he arrived, he looked smaller. Not physically, Victor was still tall, still had the tailored coat, the expensive watch. But there was tension in his shoulders, an off-rhythm in his walk, like he was trying to remind himself who he used to be. He didn't shake my hand. Just sat. I don't know what you think you're doing, he said. I'm not sure you do either, I replied evenly. He exhaled hard. Look. Whatever this is, it's not going to work. I don't know who's feeding you this stuff, but you're out of your league. Interesting, I said. Because you fired me for being too involved. Now I'm not involved at all and you're still rattled. He smiled briefly. Not with warmth. You've made things messy. People are nervous. You mean your people? Look, he leaned in. I'm not here to threaten. I'm offering you a way out. Quiet. Clean. Whatever documents you've got, delete them. Walk away. You'll be paid if that's what you want. I watched him, wondering if he actually believed that was enough. Money. Silence. Reset. No lawyers. No press, I reminded him. He tilted his head. You want something else? Say it. I paused. Just long enough to make him uncertain. You'll know soon, I said. He narrowed his eyes. You don't have the reach you think you do. He stood up then, buttoned his coat, and walked out without another word. And maybe he thought that was the end of it, a final warning, a last show of power. But what he didn't know was this. While he was playing legacy chess, I'd already bought one of the pieces off the board. The holding company that handled his logistics pipeline? Its largest minority stakeholder had changed last week. Quietly. Efficiently. Through a shell owned by a firm no one connected to me. I didn't need to threaten him. He just hadn't realized how many walls I'd already moved. You ever notice how some men can't see a trap unless it closes on their own hand? It didn't happen all at once. It never does. The first sign came 2 days after the meeting. A freeze order on a partner account. Routine audit, they claimed. Just standard procedure. Victor called it a blip. Told his board not to worry. Then one of his legacy investors pulled out of a pipeline deal, no explanation, just a withdrawal of interest and a vague note about concerns over operational opacity. That's how they always say it. Clean. Cold. By the end of the week, 2 vendors had requested updated terms. One of them, logistics, suddenly wanted collateral. That had never happened before. Victor responded the only way he knew how, with pressure. He called in meetings, raised his voice more often, fired 2 managers for misalignment, reorganized the reporting chain. Classic moves from someone trying to fix rot with rearranged furniture. Meanwhile, I said nothing. Not to him. Not to anyone who'd recognize my name. But I'd made sure word quietly reached the right inboxes: regulators, compliance leads, due diligence firms. Just breadcrumbs. Nothing actionable on its own. But together? It painted a very interesting picture. One of Victor's senior partners, a man named Grayson, reached out through a third party. Wanted to know what I knew. What I was doing. Whether I was open to a conversation. I wasn't. But I told them to keep watching the filings. That week, a familiar face called. Carter Lang. I've been approached, he said, no small talk. Twice in the last 5 days. They think I'm working with you. Are you? You tell me. I let him wait in the silence for a few seconds. I need a name, I said. The person handling their compliance cascade. The one pulling the strings inside. He didn't hesitate. Celeste March. I wrote it down. Thanks, Carter. You really doing this? I already did. You ever watch someone try to win a chess match 2 turns after the board's already been cleared? Victor hadn't just lost control, he didn't know how much of it was ever real. For years, people had played along because it was easy. Because he could promise growth and make the right calls at the right lunches. But when things got hard and eyes turned sharp, that comfort cracked. And loyalty turned soft. And in that vacuum, all it took was a single, carefully placed truth, and the whole system started to fold in on itself. I didn't send a letter. I didn't give a warning. But the holding company that had managed Victor's most valuable logistics network? It changed hands that week. Legally. Quietly. Without a single headline. He didn't even know it was gone until the new terms hit his desk. By then, the floor had already moved beneath him. My mother insisted on it. Just a small dinner, she said, like that would soften the weight of the invitation. Just family. I didn't ask who else was coming. I already knew. We met at a place they used to love, the kind with white tablecloths and waiters who remembered your name if you tipped well. My mother wore something new. My father didn't say much, as usual. He never liked choosing sides. Victor arrived late, of course. Always had to be the last one in. He hugged my mother tightly, clapped my father on the back, and when he turned to me, he just nodded. As if we were cordial strangers. We talked about weather. Flights. A new movie no one had seen. The kind of conversation you have when everyone's thinking about something else but refuses to say it first. I let them go on. Let the wine settle. Let the silence between courses stretch just long enough to sting. Then Victor leaned back, folded his hands over his stomach and said, "You've made some interesting friends lately." There it was. My mother stiffened slightly. She looked at me, then back at him. I took a sip of water. I've been working. I know, he said. Everyone knows. Whispers are louder than you think. I met his eyes. They tend to be when people stop listening to orders. A pause. He smiled, but not really. I don't hold grudges, you know. I told you before, I wasn't trying to push you out. It was business. My father looked down at his napkin. My mother reached for her glass again. And this is what? I asked. Dinner diplomacy? Look, we can clean this up. The people you're dealing with, they're not in it for the long haul. They'll fold when the money cools. That's funny, I said. They said the same about you. He didn't answer that. You ever watch someone realize they've run out of script? The waiter brought the main course. No one touched their food. I'm offering you a way back in, Victor said quietly. No press. No pressuring. Just come home. My mother looked hopeful. I let the silence hang there. Not dramatic. Just still. Then I said gently, "You never built a home. Just a house full of mirrors." And I meant it. I turned to my mother. "Thank you for dinner." To my father, "I'll call you soon." To Victor, nothing. And then I stood, took my coat, and walked into the night. The email came on a Thursday. No subject line. Just a digital envelope from a firm I'd only heard mentioned in low tones, one of those entities that operate beneath headlines, behind acquisitions, between the lines. Your contribution has been formally reviewed and confirmed. Please find the executed agreement and your advisory award enclosed. The number was large. I reread it twice. Not out of disbelief, but because it deserved the attention. 12 million. Technically, it was a retention incentive. In practice, it was recognition. Payment for what I'd made visible, and what I'd helped dismantle without ever stepping into a courtroom. You'd be surprised how expensive silence can be, when it's backed by proof. The transfer cleared the next day. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't buy anything. I went for a walk. There's a stretch along the East River where the air feels just a little less filtered. I found a bench there. No music, no phone. Just the sound of water slapping the bulkhead and the occasional wheel rattle from a passing jogger. I'd spent months collecting pieces. Names. Numbers. Gaps in contracts. Missed footnotes. Then more months building something no one could trace back to me until it was already in motion. Now I sat in silence, not because I had nothing left to say, but because everything I needed to say had already been done. Victor's company hadn't collapsed. That would have been too loud. Too easy. It was still standing on paper. But its structure had changed. Quietly. He wasn't the center anymore. Just another name in the middle layer, where no one asks questions unless the dividends dry up. He stopped showing up at the office every day. I heard through someone who didn't know I was listening that he'd taken a step back. Spends more time at his country house now. Less public. Less certain. I never corrected the rumors. And me? I work under a different name now. 2, actually. Both clean. Both real enough to pass any background check, but quiet enough to stay out of Google. My clients don't ask for business cards. They ask if I'll take the meeting. And I do when it's worth it. Sometimes I wonder if he still thinks about that last conversation. If he ever looks at the paperwork and wonders how the floor shifted beneath him without a sound. But I don't need the answer. You ever get the feeling that maybe revenge doesn't always look like revenge? Sometimes it just looks like balance. Sometimes it looks like walking away richer, smarter, and never needing to look back. And that's exactly what I did. And now I would like to hear your opinion. Who really did wrong in this story? Write your versions in the comments. Do you want your story to be broadcast on the channel? Write it in the comments or send it to me at the email address listed in the channel description. I will definitely voice the most interesting ones.